Welcome back, Rage Nation. Got myself Pete here.
That's not really exciting.
You got Senior Dixon.
I don't think that's appropriate.
And you got Monsieur Leopard.
Explorers deserved it. No.
Absolutely.
I was disgusted. I cannot believe they've done this.
Why is wacky? Why is that good? It's just nonsense.
I disagree on that. That's not possible.
We're getting the band back together. We're on a mission. Yeah.
Now we've got a whole new list of things to complain about.
Welcome back, Rage Nation. We are at it again. Got myself Pete and got two guests on that you'll notice Dixon's not on and Chris is still AWOL. So we got Nick from the Texas meta, and then we got Landon from the Landon, I believe are you Chicago or are you just Illinois?
Chicago is it.
There you go. So welcome on, fellas. Good to see you.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Good to be here.
Nick, don't appropriate Texas howdies.
Yeah, don't tell any of these Texans I'm actually from California.
They'll kick you out.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, got both you on because
I'm not allowed to say howdy. I'm in trouble.
You say howdy a lot.
To the right people.
That's fair. I mean, I'm from New York, so I definitely have I don't say howdy, I say y'all a lot, but other Southern sayings. But yeah, I got you guys on because we're going to talk about some of the Nova stuff that went on. I mean, you both did well, but Nick, you really just did well on the second tournament. The first tournament, I guess you got the yips and the bad juju and didn't turn out so good for you.
No, no, not at all.
Yeah, we'll get into that because it's funny. It's funny. It's good. I could feel the rage from your text messages. So it made me smile, even though I was like, poor Nick.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to talk about Nova. There were two big tournaments. It basically was two-day tournaments. You had the Invitational Masters, which technically you had to qualify through different tournaments and events. And then you had just the open tournament on Saturday and Sunday, which anybody that came to Nova and signed up and paid could play in. So definitely interested to talk about not just the matchups that you both had on both those tournaments, because you both played in both, but also just to get some, whenever we have these larger tournaments, to me, it's definitely interesting to talk about, one, what we're noticing in the meta, because when you get people traveling from across the country, different areas, you get different keywords played, you get different types of play. And I think we get a good idea of some of the, just some of the things in the game that are really strong, some things that might be struggling, just different tendencies. So that's going to be definitely one of the things we talk about. But before we get into it, make sure that you guys are checking us on YouTube. Starting to post the episodes, not just audio anymore. We're putting them on YouTube as well. So that way people that like that media format can definitely do that. Some people liked it with the cards and stuff popping up. So we're going to continue to kind of edit that and improve that for everybody. Definitely make sure you look at Instagram and Twitter. That's where I basically put up a lot of my, hey, this is what I'm painting. So you can see things like, to Landon's happiness, I'm starting to paint and play some 10 Thunder stuff. So Landon, you're not the only one.
Yep.
Even got a little kabuki on there. I tell you what, I don't know if either of you have messed with the new Army Painter speed paints, but they work pretty good. I was pretty impressed with them. Either of you get a chance to use those?
I've used a little bit of them, but I'm a terrible judge of painting and capabilities on that shit. But it works well for my purpose for sure.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this Kabuki Warrior is almost probably 90% Army Paint speed paint. The only color that I highlighted was the purple, because the purple I got, it didn't have as high of a bright point as some of the other colors. But the Emissary for 10 Thunders, this is just their yellow and their green, and literally that's it. And it turned out pretty well.
It looks really good. I agree.
Yeah. So if you are a lazy painter, I like the contrast paints for GW, but the not 10 Thunders, but the Army Painter speed paints are a little bit better. I was pretty impressed by them. So definitely check those out because it'll help you become a better painter. I painted and posted a picture of the Terracotta Warrior, and that is literally just one brown speed paint from Army Painter, and it looks amazing because of all the cracks and stuff in the model. So definitely good to use. And then finally, if you want to support us directly, check us out on patreon.com/ragequitwire, where you can support us for as little as $1 and get the content a little bit early. So getting into Nova, the one thing I did appreciate is whoever was running the Nova, which I don't know if it was Jeff or whoever.
It was Jeff.
Okay, good. Yeah, he used Longshanks, which I love because Longshanks, it just, to me, it operates smoother. It keeps better like live track of events. And it's constantly being improved by the person that runs it. So I was happy to see him using it. Yeah, let's just kind of start off with the Masters tournament, essentially, as a War Machine player would call it. But I mean, the Masters tournament itself was pretty big. It had almost 20, looks like 23 with a drop. And I mean, it pretty much was a Shark Tank. I mean, you had people from good players like Andre from the Texas meta, you had Cody from our meta, you had solid players like Maeve and John from, the Southeast as well. Obviously, Landon, you had a couple people from your area come, some Northeastern people. So, I mean, this was a strong tournament. And going into it, knowing that you just have solid players, I mean, you guys play in a lot of events, so I don't know if that factors into how you approach a tournament when you go into it knowing there's high caliber players.
Yeah, for me, I overthought it and really psyched myself out on it. Yeah, it was a shit show. And it shows with my second tournament because I totally threw that out the window and said let's have fun and did way better.
Yeah, because I think if I went to this, which I was going to, but obviously family stuff and then other things, but if I went into this knowing high caliber players, that's when I think I basically pick my best two keywords and I just run the crap out of that. So if I was playing Guild, it's like, cool, I'm going to play, Hoffman, and I'm going to play, I would probably play Dashel if that was the two I was playing in Guild, just because those were the two that I think to me are most powerful, most flexible, and just solid. So those are the two I would just do into this tournament because I'm like, they're solid, they're not going anywhere. If I was playing Outcast, I might just solo Von Schill because I'm like, he's flexible, can do most of these, and I'm comfortable with it. So what about you, Landon? Were you pretty? How did you approach this tournament? Obviously, knowing there's a good amount of good players in this one.
Yeah, I can't say I was super wigged out about anything, just because I go to these events knowing that I'm going to have a good time no matter what. The fact that I tend to win a lot of my games is just an extra added bonus. But like, I was just going in. I had thankfully borrowed a couple models from a couple of teammates who live out in Boston, as we're doing stuff with the Danger Planet, who is a Goonhammer affiliate. But they had loaned me a couple of 10 Thunders models for the weekend to play, and so I knew that was what I was playing. I've been super comfortable playing Yoko, and that's kind of what I ended up soloing, for better or for worse.
Nice.
Though, to be fair, I had also in my bench Lynch and Jan Lo if I wanted to.
Yeah, and let me ask you both, because this was the first major tournament where Damien was live. Did that factor any into how you played in this tournament?
Well, I played against it, and that was a bad game for me. But it was definitely a reason why I knew I wanted to have Yoko available.
Okay, so what about you, Nick? Were you worried about the new hotness with Damien being dropped?
Worried, yes, but I dodged that bullet the entire week. So luckily, I didn't have to worry about that major master and crew because I wasn't prepared for it at all.
Well, and I think you got into the bottom of the bracket early, and it looks like, I mean, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like Damien ended up faring pretty well in this event.
Yeah, he lost one game, and that was to Hoffman too.
That seems fair. If you're going to lose, that's how you got to lose. And I'm guessing, Landon, is that the game that you played against David and he just dropped Damien, and is that the game that you got caught on?
Yep, that'd be the game that I lost.
Okay, we'll get into that a little bit, because I know that after playing 5 games against Damien, going into an event like this, I think you had to plan for it. And I think Cody ended up soloing. Did Longton end up soloing Damien too?
The only game he didn't play Damien 2 was... he didn't play Damien 2 for one game against me, and then he didn't play Damien 2 in the game where he had to play Hoffman to beat Damien 2, or Damien, so... yes, but...
Yeah, I think that's something that you got to think about when new models drop. You have to prepare yourself for those. And let me just ask you guys in general before we get into kind of your rounds here. How are you now, especially after this event, feeling about gaining grounds 3? I know there's some people that are still kind of on the fence about how they're feeling about it. So I just, after a whole weekend of just a crap ton of Malifaux, how you guys feeling about the gaining grounds?
I like it.
Yeah, it's grown on me pretty big. It starting to catch on to all the intricacies and the nuances of the new strats and schemes, and learning where the space is gonna, or where the fight's gonna happen on the
Yeah.
board, and controlling that area, and what works, what doesn't. Seeing pass tokens be a huge factor in GG3, which is Landon and I's first game, which was a learning experience to say the least.
So was that the Yoko 2 crap ton of pass tokens?
Yep.
Yeah.
What round did you guys play?
Round 1.
Round 1, I think, in the Masters, and round 3 for the Open.
Well, you know,
That's correct,
why don't we get into round 1 then here, just kind of since we're right there. I mean, this was cursed objects, looked like standard deployment, and yeah, you guys are kind of facing towards each other. So you guys can kind of just talk about how that game, like what you brought into cursed objects, like why you brought Yoko and Nick. I can't remember what you brought, but why you brought your master.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I can. Oh, if you want to lead off, that's fine.
I think he's pulling it up.
Yeah, go ahead, Landon.
Okay, so I ended up taking Yoko 2 mostly because, firstly, I just like Yoko in a sort of scheme where I don't have to go anywhere, right? So with cursed objects, it's the idea that if I can have this activation control, I can kind of dictate where the engagement happens just by watching how my opponent moves around. I have Fuhatsu, so I have this big range piece. So if he doesn't come into me, then I just get to pump damage into him without him getting much of a say-so. And then, generally speaking, a lot of her models are just kind of tanky, like Hina's Armor 2, Bill's Armor 1. And I'm feeling kind of confident just dropping the list that I've been running for a lot of different rounds. So it's a good way to start the day. Nothing too novel.
Yeah. What'd you end up bringing, Nick?
I brought Bashal 2. Really wanted to try to overpower with some beefy models, but being able to control first turn, Yuko can really control the board and where the people are going to be. And so it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Landon, it was, you did a lot of your support models and waited for your final 2 major activations using your pumping out your pass tokens, and I was activated out. I had all of my pieces on the board, and with Dashel 2,
just kind of waiting.
Yeah, with Dashel 2, you can easily clear majority of the board, but not with an unactivated Bill Algren and Hinamatsu and Yuko. That's just asking for trouble. So it really made me cagey, and then he still got the jump on me. So seeing those pass tokens work in that manner was pretty enlightening.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good description of what happened. I kind of just passed out until it was time to go in, and I did my signature trick where I rocket Hinamatsu up the board by pushing her 5, then charging her with Bill with I've got your back, and then just charged his backline to start getting his support models out of the way. I think I killed a sergeant turn 1, then I killed a dispatcher and a steward turn 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Yoko, not Yoko, but yeah, it is Yoko. She has is it an attack action or is it tactical that she gets to push a model?
It's tactical, I believe.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah, because
she can do it to herself.
A lot of
and
out of
you can do it
activation
without worrying about
movement for
concealment.
sure. And you even have lures in there, so you can reposition yourself with your own lures. You can lure his stuff in. So yeah, there's a lot going on there with Yoko. That's just about control, and then controlling where the fight is, controlling who's in the fight. And yeah, I can definitely see, especially Hinamatsu, just beat sticking something.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It was great. How did you guys find cursed objects with Bashal? I mean, it looks like Nick, you're probably able to bash a couple of things to get your at least your strats. I don't know if you got your schemes in that game.
No, I didn't get any of my schemes. It really just went downhill. Actually, no, I did get one scheme. I got an in your face, but I was unable to have enough activations to get any point of breakthrough, which I was trying to accomplish. But cursed objects, just trying to beat things down and get those tokens was.
In your face seems really easy with Bashal.
You'd think so, until you face Landon that knows exactly how to counter it. So it was good. I learned a lot from the game, though. That's ultimately what I take from that. It wasn't a bad start. It was I kind of went into it knowing that I was outclassed, outmatched, and I was going to give it everything I got to minimize diff and to really see what I can do and test myself.
I mean, you didn't get 8-0'd there, Nick, so that's not terrible.
I call that winning. I don't know about anybody else.
Win. Landon, you weren't scared of Bashel. You just kind of, controlled him and pass tokened him and just kind of, murdered everything else besides Bashel, or did you go after Bashel any?
Honestly, Bashel was a matchup I was kind of afraid of just because he gets to have so much durability on all of his guys, but ultimately I was able to pass out and see, okay, these are the models that are going to be able to use Soul Stones this turn, and then just kill the models that weren't in the Dashel bubble.
Yeah.
So that was really the window I was looking for, and Nick thankfully gave it to me. So I think Dashel lived the entire game. I only started putting attacks into him once I had dropped both the Executioners and pretty much every other model.
Yeah, the double Executioner in that stupid Dashel list, especially the first couple turns, it's aggressive, it's durable, you're drawing a bunch of cards because the Dispatcher's nearby. It gets pretty gross quick.
Yeah, no, it certainly can. And so, you just got to look for what openings that your opponent's going to give you and try and exploit that as best you can. Because trying to ram headfirst into Dashel is a losing recipe.
Not a good idea. Do you remember what schemes you took in that one, Landon?
Oh boy.
If you don't,
I
it's fine.
believe I ended up taking In Your Face, and I took. I don't remember what my other scheme was. I know it wasn't Breakthrough.
Are you because I know Yoko 2 and the Kanochis, I know specifically, especially when you get a bunch of distracted out, they can actually put out a bunch of damage. How did that play out in that game that you played with those two models?
So the Kunoichi, it tends to sit back and give focus for a lot of the time, and then try and reposition with "I've got your back." Every once in a while, you get a cheeky no witnesses in with them. I used to think that it wasn't something that happened a lot, and then the more I play, the more it actually
just randomly
happens.
pops
I'm like,
up.
okay, this is good. But I don't recall my Kunoichi doing a ton this game, other than just kind of sitting back. And trying to not die, because Min 3 gets real scary against Executioners and Bashel when your stats are I'm trying to live with Disguised.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that she has, at least Yoko has stealth too, so that helps her kind of stay up. You have to be in base contact to engage her, so that's always good. I haven't tried Yoko 2 out yet, but I definitely have her painted up and excited to give her the old college try here. Sooner than later, I'm still on the McCabe train currently.
McCabe train is plenty fun.
Yeah, Nick said that I'm just a fiend for playing McCabe apparently because he thinks McCabe's pretty decent.
I love McCabe. McCabe 1 and 2. I could probably solo them and still have a good time and be competitive.
I am going to solo him next weekend. There's a small tournament that we're doing, and I'm just going to solo McCabe and see how we do.
Nice.
See what happens.
In 10 Thunders, just because I think he's better in 10 Thunders than Explorers, just because Explorers don't have as many useful minions. I tell you what, Landon, that's the thing I've noticed about playing just McCabe. This is just McCabe, no other Masters yet. McCabe loves minions, and 10 Thunders have so many freaking awesome minions. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, for certain. There are a lot of good choices to try in Thunders with McCabe. It's kind of dealer's choice.
All right, well, you guys kind of, kick off the day that way, and I mean, you guys played, I think it was 3 rounds on Thursday and then 2 rounds on Friday. Is that how that went?
Yeah, that's correct.
So, looking at your other 2 games that day, is either one of those games kind of stick out to you guys on Thursday? Nick, I know you started kind of having some bad luck happen.
Yeah, well, round 2 I got a win against a local, but I played 2 locals the rest of the day.
That sucks.
And I was expecting Transmortis to hit the board and from one of my players, and he jackdawed me. So I was not prepared for that amount of negative play experience.
Negative play experience.
In flank. He was up my ass round 1, so.
Oh, you played Brian.
Yeah. And that's one of his strongest masters he knows. So he knew it in and out. He knew every trigger that he needed to get up the board and just teleport. And I just kept messing with Jakuna's aura.
Yeah, I mean, and round two was carve the path, and then guard the stash was the third round that day. And I mean, it looks like you played mostly close games, at least on day one there, Nick. I mean, you had 4-2 against Titania with Perdita, and then against Jackdaw with Brian, you lost 5-3. So, I mean, it's not like you're getting blown out there. You were still having competitive games. So, I don't
Absolutely.
know. Was it just familiarity and kind of like Brian knows generally what you're doing, especially with Perdita?
Yeah, that too. Day two was really the shit show. Was when we started texting and sending pictures of the crap going on. It doesn't help that I was on a hangover, but that happens at
Yeah, you get used to that with cons. What about you, Landon? How were you feeling day one with your other two games?
Yeah, so game two I played against Maeve, and at the towards the end of the turn one, Maeve's just talking to me, and she says, I think you got this one, but we're just gonna play a few turns, see what kind of points I can get. So that was a quick game of Yoko 2 versus Brewmaster, where Brewmaster kind of clumped up a bit in deployment. And I had never played against Brewmaster 2 before, but I figured if you're going to be clumped up punching your own guys, I'll probably be able to blast on you. So I took 3 models with blasts, and that worked out.
Hmm.
So that game went kind of quick, but it was still, well, it was fun for me. I don't know how fun it was for Maeve.
Well, Brewmaster 2 is an interesting matchup because, yeah, I mean, you're still getting your activation control, but Brewmaster still, if they can get poison out even on your models, can still kind of control where things are happening even at the end of the turn. So that one to me is kind of interesting, but I also know Maeve could have brought some really weird things because Maeve likes to kind of just some wild lists that I don't understand why Maeve plays those certain things sometimes, but they work out for Maeve and not me if I tried something wild. So
Yeah, her explanation as to why she brought the mouse she did made sense. It didn't. I've never seen Brewmaster before, so I don't actually know how crazy it was. But the only thing that stood out to me that I had to ask about was why Whiskey Golem didn't come out, and that was because May was afraid of all the armor ignoring I had the potential to bring, since she correctly assumed I was bringing a samurai.
sure.
And so I think it was not incorrect to leave the Whiskey Golem at home as just an enforcer that would get blown off the table.
Yeah, if I'm not see, the thing is though, and I don't know if Maeve brought a whiskey gammon then instead or another construct, but I feel like I have to bring a construct just because you want to get that aura of hazardous poison kind of aura out, and you have.
Yeah, she tried to rely on the scheme markers for
Yeah,
that.
see, that's rough because those can be removed a lot easier.
Yeah, for me it was just that the scheme markers never really moved into me, so I wasn't too worried about
That's the problem
my
too.
guys getting
Yeah,
poison.
definitely, I can see that. And then day one, did you end up playing your game against Damien and Longton there?
Yeah, that was round 3, the last game of the day, the darkest timeline, as my teammates like to put it, of having to play the guy that I had discussed all about how we were going to win the tournament
Yeah.
beforehand. And he ends up bringing the exact list that I had built for him to beat Yoko 2, because one day we were just having lunch. He's like, so how do I beat Yoko 2? And I'm like, well, let me tell you.
Boom, 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 boom.
And then model for model, the exact list I had come up with is right there. And I'm going, yep, I built this list. I know it's going to happen.
But
It is not going
you
to be a good
dropped
time for
it
me.
into anyways. You just dropped Yoko anyways, huh?
Yep. Well, I mean, Yoko's got a good matchup versus Damien too, and I wasn't actually sure if it was going to be enough to pull out the W for him. Obviously, it was.
It was a close game. It looks like what 4-3 into guard the stash.
Yeah, it's like I was telling everybody afterwards. Damien is the most overpowered nonsense ever. I lost 4-3.
Yeah,
But
that's fair.
Was
And
it
I know.
Aspirant or the other one? Unbound.
it was Aspirant that I suggested he play as
Is that the title?
versus. Yeah, that's no. They're both titled, right? But Damien Aspirant is the first one
Okay.
we saw, so I think most people will call him Damien
Yeah.
1. Damien 2, I've played into his Damien 2 before and just crushed
Gotcha.
it. So that was why I think he wanted like a Yoko counter list, so to speak. And it worked.
Yeah, and that I don't know. You can tell me how it kind of played out, but I feel like Damien won. I don't know. I feel like the crew does more lifting with Damien 1, whereas with Damien 2, it's more I'm gonna get Damien 2 in position to kill stuff. I don't know if that's how that game played out.
Damien 1 still just murders a
Okay.
model a turn by just saying you take 3 irreducible and you can't prevent damage anymore, and then hits you 3 times for anywhere from 2 to 5 a pop, since he can use Loath to get straight flips on the damage if he really wants to. It's much easier to do that when you're doing it with a 10-inch gun than with a 2-inch melee.
That's fair.
So no, Damien 1 still puts out a crap ton of damage while putting out injured.
Okay. I mean, do you? And I know we talked about this a little bit, but I mean, are you? Do you really feel like Damien's like pretty strong, and it was kind of a problem while you guys were navigating the tournament?
So I obviously need to see more table space or table time with it. But I do feel like Damien 1 is really, really strong. Damien 2 I still feel okay against.
Yeah.
Longton kind of disagrees with me, thinking that Damien 1's more the flex piece, whereas Damien 2 is the always take. But obviously he did really well with Damien 2, so it's hard for me to say that he's wrong.
Yeah, I think Damien 2, I think once you play, because I thought the same thing. I when I first played against Damien 2, I thought it was bullshit. I was like, this is the stupidest thing. And then I started looking at possible counters for him because he is a melee dude. He's going to pull you in. Yeah, you can't use soul stones. And yeah, you can't get suits against him, all that crap. But you start looking at it, it's like, well, he's actually not super hard to burn down if you just bring stuff like straight damage, just you don't need triggers.
Yeah, the way I dealt with Damien 2 was just shooting him a bunch with Fuhatsu after
that seems
passing a
solid.
bunch, and then just like flipping a few moderates, putting him in the dirt.
Yeah, I think good range lists probably can deal with him still pretty good.
Yeah, like that, and just making sure you get some solid activation control will really do
Yep.
it. Which is why in the list to counter Yoko, I told him just bring the duet so that he gets a little bit of that back, which was not great.
Oh, right, because
Not great.
he's an Arcanist, so you can bring that kind of stuff.
Yeah, duet's just gross.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm kind of like I said. I think once you play into it, you can probably figure out some counters that you're happy with.
Yeah, for sure.
But I can definitely see why people are pissed off at new toys when it's just. There does seem like, especially I feel like Damien 2, he does have a couple of things where it's like, oh, and he has this, oh, and he has that. That's great, and it is annoying the first couple times you play it.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I mean that was still 4-3, so that it's not like that game was crazy blown out or anything. So, I mean,
yeah, the thing that pissed me off about that game is Yoko just got red jokered for damage and moderated for damage a lot, to the point where she died somewhere in the middle of turn 3 or 4, so I couldn't score secret meetup on the piece of terrain in the center of the board for the endpoint because it was 3.9 inches along the diagonal, so I couldn't drop a scheme marker using kosher methods. And I had like eyeballed it, but I measured it out. I'm like, damn, this doesn't work.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys are kind of like me, especially in events like live tournaments, but I usually try not to measure things out. I do a lot of eyeballing like you, Landon, just because there is something to be said to tipping your hand when you measure things. So I try not to measure a lot out until I am actually doing the thing.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense to do stuff like that, I think.
Yeah, so get good and eyeball your stuff. Don't just measure out willy-nilly. Unless you want to do like the old psych out, like I'm going to measure this random thing over here, and then you don't do that. But then I think you're focusing too much on not playing the game.
Right.
Let's see here. So that means day one, Nick, at that Masters tournament, you were at a solid 1-2, and then looks like Landon, you were at a 2-1 at that point.
Yep, that sounds right.
So, Nick, I'm going to start with you. How'd your day 2 go?
Started off brutal against I think it was identical list that you ran with Parker too. I played the Jim Dyson, amazing guy.
You did play against Parker too.
Yep, and I knew what I needed to do. I ran Hoff 2 and knew what pieces I needed to take. It was in wedge deployment, and with stones, I didn't draw into a severe until round 3. So it was brutal just trying to go, oh shit, I'm just going to have to sit here and survive or try to top deck this shit. And I used every resource I could on positives, and nothing went my way, and Mad Dog just obliterated me. So it was brutal. James did a great job.
Yeah. When you start getting Mad Dog, you have all that ping damage coming down. Did you bring any of the upgrades to negate the pulse damage from those or no?
No, I really should have. I really tried to aggro myself in there and get the Peacekeeper up, but the Peacekeeper kept getting stalled in by rats, which is stupid. It was so ridiculous. These little rats were keeping the Peacekeeper from walking. It was just a he did a great job controlling the board and where I couldn't go, and it just went downhill from there. But well done, Jim.
Yeah, I think there was one point which I was happy that you saw that because you and I played that at least you saw Parker a bunch
Hmm.
from me, so it was good to see him out in the wild. But yeah, I mean, you sent me a picture, and I think this was after you stoned. You sent me a picture where you had a 4, a 5, a 5, a 6, 6, 7, and I was like, "Good Lord, man!"
Right, and I stoned and dropped in 2 1s or a 1 and a 2 or something. It was brutal.
All right, so Nick had the bad feels. Cards got him. What about you, Landon? How'd day 2 go?
Day 2, I had to play into. Trying to remember who started off my round 4 of day 2. I know what happened round 5 pretty well because I had to play another Danger Planet guy.
Let's see here. It looks like you played Sam round 5, and it looks like he was playing Maxine. And
Yeah, that I remember. I'm trying to remember who
I
my
think you
round 4
played. I think
was.
you actually played Maeve round 4 from what it looks like. It looks like you played John
Oh,
Gould.
okay.
You played John Goulborn.
Oh, right. John Goulborn was my round 2 and Maeve was my round 4. I was messing that up. Okay. Yeah, no. So I guess I'll just talk about my John Goulborn
Tell me
game
you
real
didn't
quick.
have the most fun playing John, just Shenlong nonsense.
So like the only problem I had with my game with John Goulborn was that it looked like he had accidentally left his cards at home or something. So we just had a really slow game since we had to look stuff up in the app a lot.
Uh,
And
yeah, I can see
I
that.
also had to play on probably what I'm going to call the worst table at the entire event, and John will back me up on this. We both locked in lists without looking at the table, and then we look down at the table when we're deploying, and we see this giant river that just splits the table. It's probably like a 5-6 inch wide river, and this is
I've
corner
seen that.
deploy,
Yeah,
and my corner is just entirely a forest, right? So John was the attacker, so he puts me in a
you're like
forest,
balls.
and then immediately after I get out of the forest, I have to trek across this 5-inch wide river. And so I'm just thinking, man, I should have really taken Train Ninja. And John's like, yeah, I really should have taken Train Ninja.
Look at the board,
And
folks.
we're
It
just
helps you out.
both playing on this miserable board for
So
both of
basically, probably
us,
for
but
like a
it was a
turn and
lot
a
of fun.
half, you guys are just trying to sludge through all this crap.
Yeah, like I tried to do my typical unpack, and I think I got maybe a third of the way up
Oh,
the board instead of all the way up the board.
okay.
I'm like, man, this is tough.
All right. Well, how'd your game with Sam go, though?
My game with
I'm seeing a
Sam
lot of
was
Maxines being dropped.
yeah, Andre made it popular with the whole Maxine 1, but Sam's much more of a Maxine 2 kind of guy. So that was the game where I just kind of it was actually my first game in a Maxine 2 ever. And so I'm like, oh, I totally know what Maxine does. I did not know what Maxine does.
He, in
um,
fact, did not know.
So that was the game I mentioned a little bit earlier before we started, where I kind of play my typical tank or KG Yoko 2 game, but he had brought Jin in order to get the free pass token to kind of negate my
Oh,
activation
okay.
control a bit, and it ends up going like end of turn 1. I try to lure Maxine 2 in, and he's like, okay, and Maxine 2 gets lured in, and then he just bonus action leaps her right back after taking 3 attacks. And I'm like, well, this is not going to be a good game if
Well,
this is how it's going to
that
go.
wasn't good.
So I make this one kind of desperation play with only 2 12s in my hand, thinking 12's a good enough card, right? With my lone
What's the
swordsman, I try and
likelihood,
charge
right?
Harada before he can get that stupid aura up. And he just cheats a 13. And I'm like, all right, well, if I don't kill a model against Maxine 2, it doesn't die because he just flips 4 tomes and heals it.
Yeah.
So I don't even bother cheating the second attack after the first one misses, and the lone swordsman just dies because he takes his own 4 irreducible and then just gets mauled by the rest of his crew. So at that point in time, I'm feeling pretty done. Hinamatsu dies later in that same turn, and I'm just like, well, it's the end of the tournament. I'll just play it out, see what I get for points. And somewhere in like the end of the turn 3, I'm trying to score a cheeky guard stash with Bill over in like his deployment corner, and he says, "All right, I'm gonna run Maxine all the way up there to stop you." And I'm going, "Oh, that's next to my charm warder. You're approaching my charm warder. How very nice of you." And then he's like, "Oh, whatever, no big deal." My charm warder dings him for 2 or whatever with a melee, and we go into the next turn. And he uses his last stone to stone for cards. And I'm like, "Oh, he must really want to win initiative." We flip for initiative, and he just doesn't cheat. And I'm like, "You're okay with me going first?" And he's like, "Yeah, whatever." So I go with Bill. I knock Maxine down to 0 wounds. He's like, "Okay, cool. I'll place over here and heal." I'm like,
No, you
nobody.
won't.
This is a charm order. It says right here you don't. And he goes, "Oh, crap."
Lantern of Souls. Get wrecked. Oh, that's so...
So Sam learned what charm orders
I have a feeling you didn't feel too bad about that, though.
Yeah, I thought it was funnier than anything. I'm just like, man, whoops. And luckily, it seems he felt the same way at the time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't always forget about Lantern of Souls, especially with the Charm Warder. There are other models that have that ability that I forget about it, but I feel like that's pretty much the thing Charm Warders are usually brought for.
Right, it's the iconic Charm Warder ability. I didn't feel like I needed to point it out, because that was the only reason I hired a Charm Warder. Even it's like I need Lantern in this list, so I'll bring it in here, and then we'll see if it works.
I got wrecked by Maxine too, and I was playing Bayou, and Bayou in fact does not have Lantern of Souls. So
yeah, you wish.
I do wish. I would still play Bayou.
Yeah,
maybe
from there, I get to play a nice tight game because I actually end up scoring 2 points on strategy on turn 4 and turn 5. Since I didn't get the original one after he denied it with Maxine, but then he was running a little light on models just because he played a really elite list, and like 3 or 4 of them were in my deployment zone. And then I get to get my second point on martyrs because I had already fed him my first martyr earlier in the game with my terracotta I'd been hiding the whole time, and end up clawing it back 5-4 in a game I was pretty confident I was losing on turn 2 after I had dropped a third of my list for no extra crackback. So that felt good.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of why you just we were talking about this before we started recording. I do feel like, especially when you get competitive, that sometimes you got to just finish out rough games. One, because that was like the game we played, Nick, where you played Lady J and I was playing Parker Dead Man Walking. And I wanted to see how well it could fight out of a bad situation. And I think there's a lot to be said, especially in tournaments, to just kind of play it out. And I know it's tough because I've been there where I just want to throw cards, but just play it out and see how many points, like you were saying, Landon. And honestly, I mean, round 5, your opponent and you sometimes, but hopefully your opponent might make a mistake that just lets you back in a game.
Right.
So
yeah, like sometimes people just make mistakes and you score points, and it's really nice when that happens.
You're like, thank you, I will take that. And yeah, so the Masters tournament ended up finishing with Longton ended up getting first with, I won't even say Arcanist, we'll just say Damien. Landon.
He played Hoffman once.
Okay, fair. Damien was on looking. But yeah, Damien. Landon, you took second with 10 Thunders, very nice. And then Cody took third, and I think, I'm not going to look, but I'm pretty sure Cody was pretty heavy just playing Damien.
Yeah, I don't think Cody actually played anything that wasn't Damien.
Yeah, Cody kind of does that.
Like 90% confident.
He'll kind of, generally, he'll pick a faction, he'll kind of run at least one keyword, and then maybe double master it up. He likes doing the double master thing.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised because despite the fact that double masters were legal in the Masters, I didn't actually see anyone try it. Did you?
No,
Nick?
not at all. I plenty of time after I got tabled to go look at other tables, and I didn't see any double masters either.
Nick, after I went to go get a beer to calm down.
Yeah, I threw the salty bit in there. But no, I didn't see as many double masters as I anticipated. I was really looking for some cheeky shit.
That's interesting because, and I know, Landon, you can attest to this. When we went to Captain Con, it seems like there were a ton of people running double masters.
Yeah, they were all over at Captain Con. That's kind of why I was expecting to see a bit more.
Maybe that's just Gaining Grounds 3. I don't know.
It could be that we were playing bans, right? And maybe people just ban the correct master.
Oh, you guys were
turn.
playing bans.
Yeah, bans is a big reason why I ended up playing Yoko as opposed to like Lynch or anyone else. Just because Yoko's keyword is super solid and has all the models you want.
Yeah, a lot of people will ban Yoko just to get rid of things like the Kenochi and
Charm
Hinam-
order.
is
Yeah, and they can't do
Hinamatsu,
that if
yeah.
you're just playing it.
Right.
So yeah, and that's an interesting format. I haven't played bands yet, but I definitely like it because if there's like a second master you just hate, I love the fact that you can just be like, "Yep, you're not playing Hoffman 2." So that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, I imagine that's got to be it.
Yeah, and it looks like as far as factions go, there was a pretty good spread as far as the breakdown of the different factions. It looks like they were all represented in this, so pretty decent spread.
How many Ten Thunders players were there? Was it actually just me? Or,
No,
no,
it
John
was you and
Goldborn as
John.
well.
It was
Right, yeah.
just you and John.
Just me and John. All right.
Hey, like I said, we're bringing it to the Rage Quit Wire. We've got the models painted. They're getting on the
Excellent.
table. I honestly just got tired of not knowing what the faction did. So
Right.
I played against Ten Thunders. I'm like, what the fuck does this do? So that's my big push on why I'm doing it, honestly.
Yeah, that's why I tried out Explorers right when they came out. I'm like, I got to see this on the table, and I got to be the one to do it. Otherwise, I'm just going to lose when it happens.
Right.
All right, so you guys end up doing well. Sorry, Landon did well in this tournament. It was a new. So, Nick, I do want to get your perspective because you have a whole nother tournament to play. How are you feeling after that shit show you had on day 2?
I was ready to say fuck it. No joke. I was about done. I wasn't in the right mental state just to continue, and I got to the point where I was like, wait a minute, I'm here to have fun. Like, who gives a shit at this point, right? I'm in a room full of killers. These guys are all really good players, guys and girls. We're all really good players. Just have fun and enjoy the games with your the people you see online all the time. And when I changed my perspective on how to approach the next tournament is when things went way better.
Yeah, and I also like it because I think at that was the moment where you also decided to be like, "F it, I'm just dropping Perdita."
Yep, that's exactly what I did. I know her well. I know all the intricacies and the shenanigans I can do on multiple fronts, and said, "Fuck it." I just went with it.
And Landon, you also had a change of mindset going into the next tournament.
So part of it was I had asked in a Discord, what I should do for the second day tournament, because to me, the Masters was the big important deal. And the next tournament, no matter what happened, I was going to have fun. Then the next part of it was drinking a lot at karaoke.
I saw the pictures. I think they posted it on Danger Planet's YouTube page. I was like, "Oh,
I
well done,
bet.
well done."
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. But then the third part of it was, of course, just being offered all of basically Guild, everything but Bass, to just like fuck around and have fun with during the Open. And so thank you to Nathan for allowing me to do that. But I'd always been thinking about like diving into Guild ever since Burn started to get spoiled.
So good.
And I had like maybe 2 or 3 games of practice with a handful of the Guild Masters. I'd played Dashel 2 before, and I'd played Sonya 2 before, and actually that might have been it. But I'm like, I like these Masters. I really want to give them a shot.
Let's see how they do. So, looking at this, I mean, and you still have a lot of the good players, obviously, who played in the Masters. It looks like there were a few more players. This one got up to about 33 players. So you get some other people who maybe aren't as cutthroat, and they're just there to kind of have some good games, maybe play something random that you hadn't seen before. But yeah, so looking at let me get into, looks like round 1 was Carve a Path. How are you guys feeling about Carve a Path? I don't know if that's one you guys are starting to like as far as a strategy or not. That one's kind of, it reminds me a lot of Heroes of the Storm and kind of guarding the cart and kind of pushing it along with, your models. So I don't know how you all feel about it.
I personally like it when it's not on corner deployment, especially on those boards at Nova. Corner to get your third and fourth point are near impossible unless you table your opponent.
Yeah,
It
and
was
this one
brutal.
looked like this one looked like it was Wedge for this second tournament.
I think it's maybe a little too easy on Wedge, but then that's countered out by just being in your opponent's face so quickly. I didn't mind it on corner, but it is a little much on some of the boards. Like on the board I described, that's with John Goldborn. That was actually our Carve the Path round. But I had eventually actually gotten it there just because Amanozaka is such a house at it. But Yeah, it can be. I wasn't getting more than 3. The other marker I just abandoned somewhere around the center. But I
So
think it's a pretty cool strat. I like most of the strats, honestly.
yeah,
agreed.
and with Perdita, Nick, what are you pushing the ball with?
Everybody, I've got so much out of activation.
So instead of concentrating,
Opportunities.
sometimes you would just be like, "Yep, go push."
Yeah, and I can push towards a model, and then operel into interacting towards it at a later date. Strategically putting Nino up in the right position to bump that marker up round 2. It just
You played against Zip round 1. How was that?
it was interesting. It was Zip 1, and Tim, awesome opponent, was concerned with the sheer volume of marker removal that I had in keyword, and the
Sure.
guild mage was on the table.
Of course, you got to bring the guild mage. Got to
Oh, of
freaking
course.
bring it.
Of course, but he did a good job trying to negate all of my shooting lanes. But eventually, it snowballed into my favor.
Yeah, I mean, Bayou stuff is just, it's Bayou stuff. You get a bad flip, and all of a sudden the model's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Bad things
Yeah.
happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you ended up getting that one 4-1. I know that, man, Nick, you're playing some cagey shit if you're only scoring like 4 or 5 points in your games.
We didn't make it out of round 3, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, that one was a slow go. That was we got a little bit late of a start. He had to pick up his cards from the room or something. We had a little bit of a late
Gotcha.
start, but yeah. So that's the low score there.
Okay. And Landon, before you talk about, because it looks like you had you played you played against Levy 2 round 1.
Yep, that'd be correct.
How'd that go? And you dropped Sonya.
Yeah, I feel a little bit bad about this one because
You
it was
should.
a newer player, I think.
How
And I don't know that
how
they'd
dare
ever
you
seen
kill the
Sonya
puppets?
before, because well, he clumped up a lot of his stuff turn 1, and well, most people know how it goes when you clump up your stuff turn 1
Fire.
against Sonya.
Lots of fire.
In
So I think I
wedge.
killed the Pale Rider without even targeting him once, just by blasting off the first the waifs and then the soul battery.
You're a bad man.
Yeah.
Well,
So I think I had 3 models dead turn 1.
Well,
One was a
not
wave.
only that, but then you're also, because most of the time you're going to get those triggers, right? Then you have pyre markers next to all your crap.
Yeah, well, you can't drop the pyre markers and blast at the same time. So if it's choosing them to kill the markers or drop the pyres, I'm going to drop the blast markers and kill your models. But like there were definitely still a bunch of pyres on the board. It was amusing because like the pyres were on his half, and that's where I want my wagon to go. So I kind of had to try and push my wagon to not remove all my pyre markers.
Yeah, and I don't know how you feel, but what's that one ability where you get to look at your opponent's like top 5 cards?
Confiscated Lord, used it every turn.
So gross.
So good.
It's like, well, I'm going to make sure you have to cheat first every time, and I'm going to use my lawyer to make sure I've got the 13 I need to do it. So,
yeah, and
you know I've got a 13, and you're flipping like crap. How high do you want to cheat?
As an opponent, you just know, like when Nick did it against me, it just makes you rethink everything because you're like, well, I might as well not even stone here because, I'm going to maybe mitigate 1 damage, or if it's the Black Joker, he just put it in there and then nothing happens.
Yeah, I was mostly shooting enforcers just to make sure that I was blasting without, any input from my opponent. But
how
about it was a rough game.
Did you get any of those sweet out of activation like smacking with the thralls?
I didn't actually get any of that. I wanted to, but my lawyer actually, amusingly enough, was just playing like patty cake with the dead rider. I would push, he would push it back because he knew he needed to try and fight for points. And that's how he gets his 1 carve point. But
I like Levy 2 a lot. And Nick, I know you're a fan of Leviticus and both versions, but I feel like Levy 2, a lot of the strats are just problematic because it's an elite list. And I think it's hard for Levy to kind of do it. I feel like you just got to grind it out with Levy 2. It's just, there's not going to be a lot of games where you just maybe not out attrition is the right word, but I don't know. It's just kind of weird to me that
you don't ever have more bodies, right?
Yeah.
Because you got so many elite models. Yeah, I feel like he does okay on like covert ops, but I don't know that I like him for much else. Maybe for the kill strategy with the tokens, cursed objects, both the COs. He can do the COs.
Yeah, but the
'Cause
other
the thing
ones just not enough bodies.
Yeah, because the thing with those strats is you can use the pass tokens you get off of his Dispel Magic to try and get last activation, and last activation, 2 riders back to back will do some good work. But like that's not always a winning strategy.
So, but you both ended up getting the win round 1. So, Nick, you got to be already feeling a lot better.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You're like, I'm not going to kill anybody for real.
Oh yeah, had a beer at lunch. I was ready to go for round 2.
All right, and round 2. I mean, it looks like you had a guild mirror match, Nick. You ended up playing against Dashel 2. That one I might have been worried about if I were you, just because how hyper aggressive and killy that can be.
Yeah, so I know Jordan.
And this was guard the stash round 2.
Guard the stash, yeah. And my opponent Jordan's another Texan, and so I knew what was coming my way, and I was able to mitigate a lot of the major damage that was coming in,
Sure.
and then just punishing him hard. I put the no heal aura up on Dashel, and I wound up killing him at the beginning of turn 2 because he shoved him in my face real quick. But I hit every mask on Frank's stat 7 sword. I kept monitoring on single negs and just kept whittling away, and he was gone. And I was able to make up a lot of room that way. So
That sounds really familiar. I wonder why.
And Landon, I'm looking at your round 2, and I'm actually a little surprised. Looks like Joel dropped Mayfang 1, and I feel like
It was Mayfang 2. It was. Mayfang.
Oh, it's just okay. I was gonna say because Mayfang 2 just seems a ton better.
Yeah, no, it was Mayfang 2. I think that might just be a mistake on Longshanks.
Okay. Yeah, how did you? Because that can be a beast of a list. So how did you navigate around Mayfang 2?
Yeah, so I guess for starters, I should say that I was going into this event entirely with the intent to play Scorpius, as we'd been told the day before that Scorpius was going to be as good, if not a better, an equivalent prize to what first place was for the Masters. And so I'm like, all right, screw it. If I'm going to win any prizes, it's got to be the Scorpius. You know, you go for the big.
So you're playing a different master each round.
Right. I had dedicated myself to that going into it. And I'd already dropped my Sonya, so I'm like, all right. Sonya with expert marksman might have been nice, but that's gone. That's the past. We're done with that.
Can't look back.
So I start looking through my list, and I'm like, well, maybe Hoffman. And so I'm talking it over with Nathan, who's loaning me the models. He's like, I had a really bad game of Hoffman versus Mayfang in the Masters. I'm like, okay, you play a more guild. I'll trust you on that.
I'll listen to you.
And so I think maybe Lucius. You know, I got to play Lucius at some point. The board that we're playing on is like a bunch of different hills we had called blocking climbable. So I can teleport basically anywhere on the map with Lucius too if I take him.
So gross.
And if I was smarter, I would have taken some good schemes to score with his bonus thing, but I ended up not taking spread them out for free points. That was one of those things where it's like, if I had played the Master once before, I would have done it.
Yeah, you like hard mode. It's okay. You like a little challenge there.
Yeah, so I end up not scoring any on Assassinate later. But, the rest of it worked out well, being able to jump around to the guard markers that had like 0 to 1 models with it with Lucius to kill the guy and then score my guard point for the round every turn, while also trying to keep him relatively lean on strat points. And I just kind of have the rest of the list cycling out, so I have a hand of 13s every turn. And that works out really well when you just get to win every duel you cheat.
It does. Feels good. And
so it was vaguely Yoko 2-esque.
Yeah, and I think that's something I'm starting to notice the more and more I play competitively is that you can play anything. Like in any given game, you could probably win with almost any keyword in Malifaux. But the ones that just are consistently, either drawing or filtering through your deck are the ones that really tend to just consistently get you the W's when you play against them.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, like, in Theoryville, I said that I really didn't like Lucius, and I'll go on record saying that I don't. But having played it once, I'm like, man, I can really get why people really like these lists.
Yeah.
It's like everything you try to do just works, right? The problem I have with it is if you ever just have like a bad Lucius turn, your entire list falls apart. Like you black one of your
He set you up pretty good.
And nothing works.
Yeah, well, that's why you go ahead and play him apparently in Neverboard and then just put Ancient Pact on him.
Yeah, right.
Then you don't have to worry about it, Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Fine. All right, last round of the day. Let's see what you guys end up playing into. Knowing Nick, you probably got another Texan, but we'll see. I know you guys played each other.
Played each other, yeah.
For the second time in as many days.
Right.
Yeah, and definitely interesting. So obviously Nick's playing Perdita, and this is where Landon you decide to drop the old Bashel there.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize your game right before this was also into Bashel. That's just a funny fact I was completely unaware
Nick's
of.
just like, here we go again.
Yeah.
So I
Same,
was like,
second verse, same as the first.
I was a little worried going into it because I knew Nick was playing Dashel round one, and I'm like, oh crap, am I going to be playing into someone who knows my models better than I do? I've played more than one game of Dashel before, but
Yeah,
not more than 5,
sure.
right? But I'm relatively confident going into it that Dashel is a good pick for the strategy and scheme pool, and I'm like, all right, we'll drop it anyways. He's
Was
still tanky, and he's
the
my favorite
was the
guildmaster.
strat cursed? Is that what this was?
It was guard the stash.
Okay.
Or no,
No.
it was covert ops. I'm sorry, it was covert ops with like leave your mark and a couple other good Dashel schemes like Vendetta.
Okay. So who ended up dying first?
Nino.
Somebody died in this damn game.
Yep.
Yeah, Nino. Landon, I'll let you say it. It's okay.
Sure. So Nino took one activation, and I'm like, all right, Nino's activated. I got my riders here, and I'm gonna measure out exactly how to get my rider to ride with me, shoot Nino twice. And it turns out I can't do it on my first activation back. So I do all this finagling with my deployment zone, feeling like which model gets my Rough Rider into position. I end up going with I think the dispatcher, doing a consolidate power and getting him in position. I'm like, all right, Nick, I showed you what I'm doing. What's your response? And I can't remember what you did back, but you didn't move Nino.
So Nino is in danger.
I put the guild mage in the 6-inch bubble, ready to heal. I was under the assumption I was going to be able to tolerate 2 shots.
One activation, yeah.
Yeah.
Did that not happen?
I go with the mounted guard. I ride with me up, and then I just stone for the crit strike. And Nick's like, "Oh, you can do that."
He can.
Yeah.
And so I cheat like the 13 of Rams to hit, or maybe it's the 12 of Rams. But I have the 13 of Rams in my hand as well. So I just shoot him again with the 13 of Rams, and Nino just dies.
Yeah. And I'm so used to bum rushing Dashel in and only using those stones on defense flips, completely ignoring the rest of the models in his crew that could stone. You know what I mean? And so it wasn't even on. I was like, oh yeah, neat.
And then the rider got a shield. The rider got a shield for using the stone too, so why not?
Yeah, he got two shielded because he used 2 stones, or no, maybe he only used 1 stone. I can't remember.
Yeah, Nick, that's when you just look at that and you're just like, well, son of a bitch.
Yep, wrote that one down to use later.
Do you play?
So he takes a ton of punishment back, and I think I just consolidate. You do something to get him back out of danger after he's taken a bunch of retaliation damage, shall we say. And just send him off to a corner later, banished to go run strategies or whatever.
Yeah, Nino going down turn 1, that's super rough though.
Yeah.
And then I will say, Landon, I do like what you said there with the rider. Is I also tend to be, I usually use the riders more to be super aggressive with the other pieces, getting the occasional shots in there, of course. But yeah, once they're super low, it's like, yeah, just run them off and go scheme somewhere.
Yeah, he eventually comes back later in the game to be a hero to take some bullets for my Vendetta target.
Like dove in front of them or something.
Yeah, no, he like rides in there, uses I've got your back to throw him behind the rider, blocking line of sight, and then just eats 2-3 activations of attacks later like a hero.
What a boss.
But it turns out later that Nick had Vendetta on that rider anyway, so he was perfectly happy to kill it.
Haha. Well, cool. I mean, that one ended. I mean, still close game though. It was 5-3, so that one kind of went to the end of it.
Oh, it was a real tight game.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that swung it was just on the last turn, I was able to deny Nick's leave your mark point by using the crow trigger on the last stone I had been clutching the entire game to drop a scheme with Dashel while removing a scheme.
Yeah.
No,
so
well
that
done.
changes it from a 4-4 to a 5-3.
Okay, so it was looking like a draw
game.
then.
I was thinking that way until that last activation with Dashel. But Landon totally mathed it out and knew exactly when to pass and to just let it ride. He killed an unactivated model to have that activation control. And then I think Dashel was buried. And so I was just trying to push models together to when he popped out, I hold him in. But nope, he just moves right along, right around, and does what he does.
Nick's over here like, I'm just playing checkers to your chess, man. It's that's some next level. That's stuff where it's like, I'm an okay player, but there are some players like I play against Cody like in every other tournament, and I can get some wins on Cody. But there's other times where I'm like, you're really planning this stuff out, and I'm just kind of flying around out there. Different types of players.
Absolutely, and it was a good game though. I
That's
learned a
all.
lot.
That's all you can ask for.
Oh yeah,
It was a good demonstration of what Perdita 2 can do when she actually gets those summons off. Because at the end of the game, I think you had both monster hunters out.
Those
Yeah.
monster hunters are brutal. Well, I asked Nick the first time I talked to him about Perdita. I was like, "How often do you get these monster hunters?" He's like, "Oh, pretty much every game."
yeah. You pick those right models to make sure they're in that range to get them grown. Because especially, I didn't have a Abuela on this list, but you start getting to those stat 7, potentially stat 8s out of activation against with whatever trigger you want, and that's stunned on a stick right there. So get that crow every time and just stun whatever you can on the opponent's crew.
Well done. And so you guys get into the last day, which is definitely where you start to see some kind of on Sunday. You never know what you're going to see on Sunday because especially that first round, people are like theory crafting. They're like sometimes the matchups are so oh, I'm playing against this faction. So some people drop some really wild stuff on that first round of the last day. So I mean, Nick, it looks like you got to go up against Brewmaster too. So I don't know how many games you have against Brewery, but that can be a tough matchup.
It really was. I did put no prisoners on Francisco because I knew he
So
was
at
gonna
least
be
he
kinda-
wasn't getting poisoned. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew he was going to be overextended a little bit, and I kept my guild mage bubble and the summon bubble with the buffs, and he correctly deployed behind a large dense piece of terrain and just handled his bubble round 1. And I didn't get any shots off really, and so the game really started kicking into gear round 2, and we got through barely the end of round 3, and I was able to squeak out a win.
So I think the question is, how many fermented river monks did that brew player bring?
3.
Whoa, that's my kind of person right there. Well
Yeah.
done, John. I guess John Moser. If I mispronounced your last name, I'm sorry, but you're my kind of brewmaster player. That's exactly what I like seeing.
Yeah, he's a local Texan, awesome dude, and he knows that crew very well, and so he was able to get through a lot of those activations fairly quickly.
And then, I mean, Landon, you just can't avoid your BFF there.
Yeah, no, it was the fourth game in 2 days that I was playing against somebody that I, play with because the first event it was Longton game 3, Sam game 5. This event it was Joel, is actually one of my locals who I probably play the most with. I had played round 2. And then Longton pops up again round 4. It tends to happen when he's doing well, you're doing
Yeah,
well.
it happens.
It's an eventuality, but luckily he's feeling real like
Saucy?
burnt out at this point
Oh,
in time.
okay.
He's like, you know what? I played so much Damien this weekend. I don't really want to play another game of Damien. And we both know that Hoff 2 is like pretty good into Damien. So tell you what, why don't you just not play Hoff 2 and I won't play Damien? And I said, okay, deal. Sounds like a great time to me. So I declare Lady J2 like an asshole because that was what I was intending to do.
You didn't say anything about that.
And he
I feel like that can be
brings
worse in a lot of situations.
Yeah, right.
Because
I actually thought Lady J2 had
these
reasonable
damn
ways into
coffin
Damien to
markers.
begin with. Because of those damn coffin markers, you just bury him so that all those passive heals don't go off and beat the crap out of him. But I make a terrible deployment mistake and just didn't realize exactly how Karis 2 and Rampage interact, or that Karis 2 had blasts.
Yeah.
So I end up eating like half the health in my whole crew
Oof.
turn 1 when
Oof.
Karis comes in eventually. But luckily I had initiative to then go last activation and barrier so that she had to do the last like 3 points of burning to herself instead of killing one of my guys.
Nice.
That's good.
And earlier in the turn, I had kidnapped Carlos from 6 inches outside of his deployment zone back into all my guys. Because, why not just walk twice, bonus action a guy through a wall, and then charge back to your deployment?
That's what I hate about Lady J. It's just like, I'm going to, get up to the middle of the board, and then I'm just going to bury what you love. That's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, so Carlos decided to meet the inside of a coffin and then just dies before he ever unburies. And he was also my vendetta target, so I was happy about that. But I end up just having enough damage to pump into Lady or to Karis 2 after she goes in the top of turn 2.
Yeah,
And
and Landon, I know that. So you play a lot of Ten Thunders, and you're used to kind of the out of keyword thing and the versatile thing. Playing into Guild, are you staying more in keyword just because that's kind of how Guild functions a little bit more than Ten Thunders?
so I absolutely agree with everything you just said for the most part. I
Mm.
think the out of keyword model I ran the most the entire event was lawyer because when you're
Yeah,
playing
why
guild, you
not?
just kind of
I
bring a
mean,
lawyer.
yeah.
But throughout the whole event, I took steward, lawyer, and a guild mage, and those were the only models I ever hired out of keyword. I don't even think I had any out of keyword in my game
And
with
two of them are
Nick.
versatile, so it's not really out
Right.
of keyword.
Right.
I brought Pale Rider as well in my last game with Hoffman, and I think my first game was Sonya.
Yeah, does that
But
just
it was pretty
does
keyword.
that feel different to you, like in a good way, just to be more
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Yoko plays pretty in keyword as well, but you do still take like the random like out of keyword model that doesn't fit in. So it was nice having a bit more cohesive of theme going on, but also just like it felt good getting a lot more variety,
yeah.
right? Because after playing 5 games of pretty much the same list with 1 or 2 models missing, it was really nice to just be able to see different stuff on the table and feel like I was playing more of a game of Malifaux rather than just going through the same motions over and over again.
Yeah, and it feels, and obviously, I mean, people that listen to me talk know I bounce around from faction to faction like all the damn time. I'm kind of like Nick and I are like akin that way. But yeah, now I'm playing Ten Thunders, and it just there's a lot of fun shit out there that it's just like why just focus on this one thing? Why not have fun figuring some new stuff out? That's kind of what I'm all about.
Yeah, hopping factions has got to be a great time because you feel like a kid in the candy store, right?
It
Whereas when
is.
you start to settle in, you start to find the tools you like, and then it's like good old rock. Nothing beats that.
Yeah, and it looks like you made Longton sad with a 7-2 victory there.
Yeah, sometime after turn 2, once I had killed Karis, we kind of looked at his crew and he's like, I don't really do anything with these models left. You want to just go get lunch early? So we, left for lunch with about an hour left on the clock instead. And it was a good decision. It was a good time. We started just talking about what the next round was going to be instead. And he gave me some excellent coaching for my next round.
Yeah, I mean, you end up getting into this last round. I don't know what the strat is because I don't think it says on here on Longshanks.
I can find it.
But
It's
while you're looking that up, you ended up getting Sam again, which it looks like Sam's doing the old Maxine thing again. And then Nick, you ended up getting Maeve with the old Bayou, and it looks like that a tale as old as time, man. At Perdita versus Ophelia.
Yep. It was non-title versions. Perdita is Perdita Light in that matchup, right? And in the title versions,
Yeah, you both took the titles in that one.
Ophelia is definitely the lesser, especially for the board that we had. Oh my god, the amount of concealment, dense terrain that was on this board
That you just don't care about concealment.
I didn't care about, and her crew cared about tremendously, and so it was a shooting gallery for me, and it was a rough one.
Those poor gremlins didn't have a chance.
No,
You're a monster. You 8-2'd that game.
yeah. So Maeve and I were at the middle of turn 2, and models were just dropping on her side of the table, and she came to the point where it's like, I'm about ready to flip this fucking table. This is not all my strategies out the window. I don't think I could score any of my points, and so we just talked out the rest of what could have happened, and we agreed on with the TO that a 8-2 was more than sufficient, and we wound up going and having beers over at the Renaissance. So
Hey, that's a win.
yeah, it was a win for both parties.
All right, Landon, and then you had Sam.
Yep. So once again, played Sam. Round 5 of the previous tournament. Played Sam round 5 of this tournament. So it's crazy that over 10 games I played the same opponents for 3 of them in each tournament. But yeah, no, I played Hoffman 2 into his Maxine 2, and I had already seen his Maxine 2 once, so I kind of knew what it did. And I went over lunch and I kind of discussed with Longton what we were going to do. He's like, all right, you play Hoffman, you run Hoffman in there like a maniac, and you just throw the models outside of the protection bubble, and it just works. And that's kind of what happened, except I took a brain fart and forgot to build lead line code on Hoffman. So Hoffman's in the middle of all of his shit, and then just starts getting beat the crap out of by Maxine. And somewhere at the top of turn 2, I'm like, Hoffman's on 2 health. I got to get out of dodge. Because he had won initiative and punched him a bunch with Maxine again. So I would manage to kill Orville just because I could with a laser, and then walk all the way
After that
back.
model.
Yeah, I hate that model. So it's like, oh, whatever. So kill him, and then just try to get healed by the toolkit. But then Jin pops out in my deployment zone, murders my mech attendant just because he was standing a little too close to the lawyer.
Poor
and I'm
little
like,
robot.
oh, yeah, that is something that would happen. So some of my healing goes away. But then we get to like the end of turn 2, and Hoffman's somehow not dead, but he's still not really healthy.
Yeah, not feeling great.
And I go, so assassinate, right? And he goes, I wish. And I go, oh, we are playing a game. So if he had taken assassinate, it was a 4-4 game, as opposed to, I think, leave your mark with his scheme that he scored 0 points on, since Peacekeeper just kind of sat in the middle the whole game.
I guess maybe he was thinking that probably not getting assassinate on Hoffman because just how tanky and durable he can be.
Yeah, so like this was apparently his first game versus Hoff 2, and he thought Hoff 2 would play a bit further back than I was going to play with him, right? So I really surprised him by throwing him right in his face and starting to use
just
that.
Put his nose
construction
right
claw.
out there. I think that's when, like, you can do the sit back and laser thing, but I think putting him in the middle of the board, I almost always put lead line on him because I don't want him repositioned out of where he is. So I usually just put him smack dab in the middle of the board, make you come and deal with him.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, lead line coat would have been objectively correct to have on him, as opposed to not in the pool. But I already had a code on Rider, and then I took no prisoners on Peacekeeper.
So you already had a lot in there.
Avoid the ping damage, and then I also took Expert Marksman on Core because I wanted to be able to kill Beeb.
Okay.
And that worked out pretty well for me. I ended up sniping Beeb from 24 inches away.
Nice.
But yeah, it was a real tight game that pretty much came down to just a bad scheme choice on Sam's part.
I do that all the time where I'm like, why did I take this stupid scheme? I can't score this at all.
But no, it was another really fun game. One where I felt like I was a bit more in control than my previous game with Sam.
Yeah, and I mean, you both ended up doing well in this just open tournament. Landon, you ended up taking it with Guild, and Nick ended up taking it with Guild. So Guild back on top, and then Longton finished third again with Sam right behind with Arcanist and Explorer. So
yeah, they actually tied, I think. So Longton was complaining the whole time that if I had just let him have one more point in our game, that he would have had third.
You just couldn't let me do it.
And of course, Sam's saying the same thing.
Ooh, I didn't even notice. Did Nick? Did Andre play Rezzers in that open?
Yeah.
Yeah, he soloed Seamus, right?
Yeah, he soloed Seamus.
Seamus 1 or 2, or both?
1, I believe.
Okay,
he likes his gun.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it seems to me that Andre had been discussing with Longton, well, how do I beat Damien? And one of the things that came up was just shooting him, right? Kind of like we said earlier.
Just a big gun.
So he thought, well, what can I play where I just shoot something to try and test out this theory? And I think the answer he came up with was Seamus.
Yeah.
So Nick, does that mean that Andre is the better Rezzer player when compared to Brian?
Oh, hot take. I'm not getting involved with that conversation.
So funny story real quick before we kind of just talk about generalities here and observations. But so Brian, the episode that came out before this, we did Von Stuck 2. We did a talk on it. And Brian was like, can I ask you a favor? I was like, yeah. He's like, can you not release this until after Nova? Because I don't want people just being like, oh, cool, I'll just counter him this way. I was like, well, it's very generous that you think we have that many listeners, but sure, I'll go ahead and hold on to that until we get out. So that was a good little thing, but yeah,
I didn't realize they were 5th and 6th neck and neck on the open.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
So since Landon abandoned 10 Thunders only had one player with John. There were freaking 7 Arcanists and 6 Guild players, though. So, I mean, still a good spread, but yeah, those two factions were the two top heavy as far as how many players played them. Rezzers had 5. So there's a couple of things kind of just I think that I noticed when looking at the breakdown. And one thing I do want to say is obviously good players are going to finish usually pretty well no matter what they play. So I don't want to put too much stock into it, but noticing just in general that Outcast, I mean, they finished okay, but I noticed they were kind of on the bottom half of the standings. And Nick, I know you were talking to me about how you were kind of a little worried for Outcast after this event.
Yeah, the sheer raw power that I saw dominate the tournament um, makes me concerned for Outcasts, I guess. But I know they have raw power. It's a matter of learning how to play it. And, is it Von Schill with his Von Schill 2? Is it, there's a lot of options I've got to sift through. But yeah, I am a little concerned that I'm sitting here with Guild, which has a lot of beat stick masters and support pieces that I know very well, and I'm jumping into a faction that I don't know all those pieces yet.
So I'm not looking at all the masters taken, but I would think since there were some Outcast players, I was kind of wondering. I mean, apparently Terra wasn't used a lot. I mean, just kind of looking at some of these people that brought certain things. So I'm kind of wondering if Terra was because I feel like she's still pretty, especially Terra 2. A little bit degenerate type stuff, but still should be pretty good in a lot of these positioning pools. So I was a little surprised not to see her a little bit, even though I don't play her a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at who's playing Outcasts on Longshanks here, one of them is the guy who showed up, hadn't played a game of
Yeah.
Malifaux before in his life, and dropped after round 1 just because he wanted to get a game in. So I think we can throw out that Outcast player. Another one was the relatively new player who is still just kind of learning the game, who was playing Levy 2 in my first round. That's number 30 right there. Then up there we have Jim Dyson. Love Jim, great guy. And so middle of the table though is exactly where I'd expect Jim. I don't think he was playing Tara at all. He was trying to Scorpius too. And so like Scorpius throws off a lot of power rankings as far as how factions go, because not every faction has like a good roster of masters. They
Yeah.
might have like just a couple good masters. I think Outcast might be in that boat. And then Tim's the one that I recognize as like the first really like notable. I expect this to be on the higher tables Outcast kind of name, and he placed 8th, which is not bad, right?
Yeah, and he brought Zip, he brought Levy, and that is Levy 1. Brought Von Schill, which is always a solid one. Don't know what the second or last game was, but then he did play Terra 2 in that last round and got a win. So yeah, I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying is that yeah, I can see that with Outcast, but I think Terra and Von Schill are still really good.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it comes down to what are the solid and good players playing. Like, I mean, obviously, if Landon decides to play Outcast, you're probably finishing somewhere decent there. Not to toot your horn too much there, Landon. Same thing, Nick. I think if you
I
were,
appreciate you doing it for me.
I think if you were, playing Outcast pretty consistently, you'd finish most of the time in the top half of the tournament. So I do think that's something important to note that it just looks like, the people that you would expect to finish in the top half just happen to mostly not pick Outcast or in other cases not pick Bayou. Bayou is the only one, and I was going to ask you guys this, where I feel like sometimes even if you're a good player, a bad round of something, just high flips can just destroy Bayou just because some of the models are so ridiculously squishy that sometimes it's hard to come back from. That's the only faction that I'm kind of looking at where it's just like, man, there's just sometimes where I love Bayou and I still play them, but there's times where even my favorite masters, a bad turn and it's like, where'd all my models go?
Yeah.
I think they've got some resilience if you're playing the right keywords. Like if you're playing Kin or you're playing Infamous, you've got a little bit of ability to try and stop that. But I can very easily see what you're, talking about happening if you're just playing like Brewmaster and you flip bad, or if you're just playing like Summer, one of the keywords that just doesn't quite have so much tech, just because they don't have a lot of like consistency in the faction. I don't think.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good way to put it. And it's it's also so the keywords that you mentioned, like Zip, I could probably solo Zip. I'm very comfortable. I think he's solid, flexible, fast, drawing a bunch of cards, cycling them, I should say. So I think that if I was playing Bayou right now, I would probably just do Brewmaster, Zip, and Maw. That'd probably be the three I would play.
Oh yeah, Maw's great.
Yeah, but Maw is the one where I'm super concerned about squishy models. It's like if they can somehow work around your Scamper, it's a rough day.
Yeah, they just flip good and they never have to cheat, right?
Yeah,
And Scamper doesn't work as a
it makes
defense.
me sad, Panda. I'm like, did you cheat? They're like, nope, son of a bitch.
That happened to Joel in one of my games. He's like, "All right, I got sparks. I'm gonna scamper away." I'm like, "No, I flipped that."
Yep,
He's like,
totally
"Oh."
didn't cheat. You're not going anywhere. Die. And then the other thing I was going to ask you guys, because it got brought up in just as we were kind of talking, did you guys feel like a lot of your games didn't go to turn five? So how do you feel that was going through the tournament? Did a lot of people not finish? I mean, how'd it go in Nova?
I'm gonna say that was my fault mostly because I was learning a new master every round, so most of my games ended somewhere in turn 4.
Okay, what about in the Masters tournament? You finished most of those?
Yeah, most of those finished. I think there might have been one or two that came early. I think my game with John was somewhere in turn 4 just because we were going a lot more slowly without having the cards to reference. And I think I only played 4 turns with Longton just because we were having such a really tough game.
Okay, what about you, Nick? How'd your games fare?
For the most part, we completed most of the games. The Brewmaster just has so many flipping activations and after activation shenanigans that has to happen.
Yep,
that
and triggers.
It took a lot to get through, and I'd say that and my first game with Tim was the only ones that did not go to end. And those were all because of one reason or another. So, but for the most part, most of my games ended around 5, which was good.
Yeah, that is good to hear. Just because I know in some events, depending on players, obviously there's some players that play slower or they're newer, which is fine. But it's always good to hear that most of the games are finishing. But I also think the closer you get to the top tables or, the tables where people know their crews, those games tend to finish because it's like, I know what I'm doing, you know what you're doing, and we're just trying to iron out the details.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as the meta goes, Gaining Grounds 3, how do you guys feel like everything's shaking out? Is Malifaux Burns a problem? Is there a certain faction that we feel maybe is more of a problem? Or is everything kind of washing out where it's like, okay, this is feeling pretty good? Silence.
Well, I think if everything comes out of the new book like Damien, I have some concerns. There's still like a couple of things that are just happening that I don't think are great for the game. I'm a little upset about the idea that they printed Jin as just like a model that exists. And I don't think what Yoko 2 does is particularly good for the game. But like other than a couple of small doom and gloom points I have, I think for the most part it came out really fun. And I really do love GG3.
Okay, so do you think, but see, that's kind of the problem though. Pass tokens are kind of, that keyword shtick. So, I mean, how would you, I don't even know how you'd address that without necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, but like the one thing that's bothering me, at least with Jin existing, is that if it was like one keyword that does it and that's a unique thing, that's fine. But if we start putting like more models like this into the game, like Jin, you can take in any faction or keyword in Explorers, right? That just kind of get activation control. We start getting back into this weird second edition type thing where you're just hiring models not because they're good, but because you want to like
Control.
go with your good models last.
Yeah, I feel strongly about that too because when I play Brewmaster 2, just being able to just delay 3 activations and now it's like cool, I have 3 models that I get to activate and
I just
it
don't
can
think
be
that's
brutal.
very fun to do to people,
Yeah.
right? Like they don't feel like they have any interaction, especially with Yoko 2 where you just draw 2 13s and you're like, I have the cards to do wherever the fuck I want. I have a free pass. Um, prepare for it because it's happening.
Prepare thy anus.
Exactly. And so
Oh,
like I
man.
feel like that's not super fun to do. But it's obviously good.
I mean, what if you could say what Yoko's kind of weakness is because it's a control keyword? I mean, what would you say is Yoko's kind of like has
I
problems with,
mean,
if
the
any.
thing that gave me the most trouble all weekend was just people taking activation control back at me, which is why I'm kind of like concerned about that trend of
This
the
is my
game.
thing.
It's like, if this is good enough that the only thing that concerns me is people doing it back to me, this is probably a sign of something that we probably don't want a lot of in the game, right? Because then it just kind of feels like an arms race.
I mean, wasn't that why pass tokens were created anyways? Because people would summon models and then essentially they would just, activate the crappy summon models and then good models at the end.
Yeah, exactly. But
Maybe bring Parker 2 with rats and just use the rats to make you use your pass tokens
yeah, that could be a thing that you do.
for that one keyword. Well,
For that
two.
one keyword. But like the other stuff that I kind of struggle with is that Yoko 2 requires a long setup to try to kind of get going. Like you try and generate a bunch of resources using your pass tokens and your models that you summon, and you get your hand of 13s. You just run at them before they have a hand of 13.
Yeah.
Sometimes things just go really bad, because then you're just kind of playing Malifaux with them, and your models are a little bit worse at playing Malifaux with them because they're kind of expected to have all the cards.
What about you, Nick? How are you generally feeling about kind of the meta and how you saw a lot of the games progress?
I'm enjoying GG3. I think the meta is decent. I'm a little concerned with Damien and what other masters are coming out of this next book.
If he is the watermark of what we're going to see out of this damn book, there's going to be some wild things.
Right. And it's hard to look at the statistics right now. I mean, it looks like there was 16 games played of Damien, and he lost one of those
But
between one and two.
I see. I think we got to be cautious with
Right.
that because it's the new car kind of effect where I think it might be powerful, but people haven't played against it a lot yet.
That's exactly what I was getting at. I mean, us Texas guys were in an Airbnb for this tournament, and we sat up for hours just trying to figure out how the hell do we counter it. What are they susceptible to? What are some strategies for each faction and master that can limit some of his effectiveness? And it's just like when EXO first came out, people were shitting bricks. Like, this is overpowered. This is bullshit. Where's this game going? And eventually we figured it out. I think this might be the same thing. I'm hoping. But these initial stats are a little powerful.
Yeah, and we do got to give the guys some credit. It was 16 games, but it was 16 games piloted by Cody and
Yeah.
Longton, right? And I
Right.
think Cole might have played a game or two, but
Yeah, totally
Yeah,
true.
it's entirely possible they would have been 16-1 with other masters too.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and that's kind of the thing you got to take away from these tournaments, where it's like, yeah, this person went 5-0 with, let's just say, I mean, Dashel, right? Or they went 5-0 with McCabe too, and then all of a sudden people are saying, oh, look how busted this is. It's like, well, you got to look at the pilot. You got to see who's playing it. They probably finish above 500 anyways. So I do think it is kind of a pump the brakes thing, and let's see. I am concerned with this new book and Malifaux Burns. I am concerned with model bloat because, especially when we have a bunch of new players, there's so many gotchas when you have this many models and titles and keywords that I can definitely see that being a problem moving forward.
Yeah, I remember buying into second edition, not really just knowing how the game worked, and I bought like a Kolodi core box and a box of Bunraku. And I'm like, all right, time to go have a fun game. And it's like, I just got completely dumpstered because Bunraku don't do anything.
Yeah, which I can appreciate, a lot of models because it's a variety. It lets you keep the game fresh. But there are some models where it's kind of like, one, there are some models that just aren't good. And then two, there's other models where it's like, well, they kind of do the same thing. So why do we have two versions of it? Um, Yeah, I think that especially for newer players, I mean, obviously not us on this podcast right now because we've played enough games where there's very few models that we don't know what they do. Obviously, maybe we have a hole somewhere where it's like, oh, I don't know this keyword as well. But generally speaking, you know the shtick. You know kind of like what this keyword does, even if you haven't seen it on the table a bunch of times. So that's something I think we need to keep an eye on as far as these, what, 6 new masters coming out with
Right.
titles.
Yeah. I gotta say, the keyword system does try and help alleviate a little bit of that, though, because the problem with second edition or like earlier editions games is that like if you added a new model, you'd added a new model to every single list that could be played,
And from what
right?
I hear, they also had abilities that did the same thing, but they were called different things.
Yeah. We're getting a little bit of that in this edition, right? Like Anya's obey is basically the same as Lucius's obey. It just works on a different keyword. But that I'm not less worried about than just like there being a lot of options. But I gotta say, I think the keyword system at least makes it so that you have to pay attention to less of it. And they're being kind of cautious about how quickly they expand keywords, I think.
Yeah, which is good for sure. So, last thing, and then we're going to get up on out of here, is I've already told people that I'm going to be doing some 10 Thunders, especially in this next event and kind of moving forward. Uh, Nick, are you staying on the guild train? I know you're kind of at least interested in Outcast there for a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stay with the guild thing until our Houston GT, which is next month. And so until then, I got to figure out what I want to do. I do like a lot of what Outcast bring to the table and the just something different to play. We'll see what happens, though.
What about you, Landon? You staying in the old 10 Thunder train?
You know, I dipped my toes into the guild pool, and I kind of liked the temperature.
You like the taste, huh?
So I might be playing a bit more guild in these coming days. It helps that we actually own the faction because Longton was playing guild for a few months this year.
Sure.
So I might just take a couple of those models and run some more Dashel. Because he was a lot of fun. He was still my favorite experience of the week.
See,
as far as like master goes.
I'm a bigger fan of Dashel 1 and flexing into Dashel 2 when I feel like I need to. I love Dashel 1. I love what he does.
I just love the ability to stone with any model in your crew. I feel like that gives you so much control over the game that no other master does, that it can just catch people off guard. Like it caught Nick off guard. It's like, I didn't know you could do that.
I think the only, I mean, Shen Long kind of does that, right? With some of it. Is that the teacher version that does that? I can't remember.
Kind of, but not anywhere near to the same extent or anywhere near as quickly.
Yeah, when you can just, I mean, you can stone executes, you can stone crit strikes, you can stone. There's a lot of good triggers with that.
Yeah,
that
you have
keyword.
And even just being able to stone reductions, right?
Mm-hmm. You also have armor ignore on an upgrade that you could put on a rifleman or whoever to put out that.
Riflemen already just have armor piercing if you need to.
That's right.
Into
You're
it.
absolutely right.
Dude, Nick, do you even bashel, bro?
I don't even bashel, bro. No, clearly I don't.
Rough.
Just add mounted guard; it'll go well.
So that gets me thinking. So, I mean, did you guys see a lot of like summoners at these tournaments, or are summoners kind of dead?
Does Dashel 2 count as a summoner?
No.
Does Dita 2 count as a summoner?
No.
Then I saw 0 summoners this event.
Okay. That makes me. I mean, I guess there was.
Well, hold on. Does Mayfang 2 count as a summoner?
No, the accidental summons don't count.
All right. Well, I think that's kind of the direction they're going with summoners, though. And I think the old summoners are just kind of out of date. And now I summon one particular model type summoners. They're really good at summoning that model, and that model usually does some really good stuff in that context. But I think they're kind of done with the blank check summoner masters. I don't think they play well.
Yeah, and I definitely think the same thing. And I can see people that probably brought summoners probably struggled in a lot of the games that were played that weekend. So, yeah, I mean, some people love summoners, and I'm not too sad to see them go because it was pretty annoying when they were in their heyday.
I actually thought they were kind of a neat experience. I never really was one to actually play like blank check summoners. But I always thought that those games were kind of cool just because they gave you a lot of different angles to think about it.
Yeah.
And so like I dabbled a little bit with Asami back when you could play Asami.
Yeah. She was viable.
And I had a lot of fun doing it, but I can easily see the argument where like it's not particularly good to have such a wide variety of what the hell can happen when I activate this model.
Yeah, there were just some keywords like you look at Somer, I mean, when he was before like GG0, GG1, he was so damn good. It was almost like why him and Maw. It was pretty much him and Maw just running the show.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I played a lot of Asami and GG 0 and 1 because her summons were able to drop markers with a bonus action, which are still useful, but still, I don't think it's the right approach, or it's being designed where that's
I
not the right approach.
So looking at Somer, because he's the one that I really Dashel, I think is still okay. Like Dashel one as a summoner, there's some pools you can't do, obviously, but I think he's still okay. But I look at Somer because I play a lot of Bayou, and I'm just like, I don't know how let's say that they try to make it where summoners do something else, and they're not summoners anymore. There are some models that are just so bad for Somer that I don't know how you make it work because some of those models you just can't hire. They're just not worth hiring into your crew. So yeah, I don't know how they're going to make them viable again. Maybe they're going to wait until, maybe a whole new, edition. But yeah, they're not in a great spot right now, a lot of them. Nick, you recall off the top of your head when that tournament is in Houston there? I think it's October 9th?
7th, 8th, 9th. Yeah, it's that second weekend in October, if my calendar would open up. Second weekend, it's the 7th, 8th, and 9th. 2-day GT, Henchman Hardcore on Saturday night. We're doing open play and then a Bonanza Brawl. Friday night, hotels are cheap. Come join us down here in Texas.
Yeah, we might send Longton down there as well.
There you go. Just put him on a bus.
Yeah, so we're discussing who's going to be able to make it out, but we're talking about it.
Okay. What about you, Landon? You got anything you want to plug? Anything you want to share?
Iowa's having an event, the Des Moines Meta, I think the 22nd, 23rd, that we'll be driving out for. So if you're interested in that, feel free to go drive out to that, meet me, meet the boys. I know Schemes and Stones doesn't put out too much content these days, but you can still.
Yeah, they're doing some like BattleTech stuff.
Yeah, and then of course always like and subscribe the Danger Planet. We got a YouTube channel where we talk tier lists. We're planning on putting some content out that's much more keyword focused for like some Tactica. So look forward to that.
Yeah, I've been looking at. I do like the tier list. I think there was I think you guys just put out the Explorer Society tier list. I think it might have been today.
That sounds right, actually, this morning.
So the tier lists are good just because I think it's interesting to hear you all talk about your thoughts. Obviously, there's some things I disagree on, but I think it's interesting to hear people that play the game and looking at the cards, even if they haven't played against it or with it, and just interpreting how they think this might play out in the current meta. So it's definitely interesting to hear y'all talk out each keyword and each title specifically.
Yeah, and honestly, I think if Malifaux was the kind of game where I could put out a tier list and everyone agreed with it, I probably wouldn't play Malifaux.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
solved games aren't very interesting, in my opinion.
So it's really good to just kind of get that discussion that we have and just kind of suss out why we feel this way.
And you guys disagree quite a bit on a lot of the keywords.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't agree with that, especially when y'all were doing 10 Thunders. Somebody trashed, I can't remember the master, but somebody just dumped it, and you were just like, well, I don't agree. I think it's actually pretty good. So
I think the only thing everyone agreed on was Asami 2 complete.
Oh my god, yeah.
Trash tier. All right, well, thanks for coming on, guys. We're going to wrap this thing up. Make sure that y'all are flipping cards, flipping tables, and we will see you all next time.